Thank you so much, Faye. And thank you, Kamala, as well, for your kind introduction and words. It is really a distinct pleasure to be here today, and thank you very much for the opportunity to share this special day with you. I want to extend a very warm welcome to everyone that has joined us today. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I'm very excited about today's topic. I think, as Nigel has already alluded to, corporate governance has become a very, very critical part of organizations. And in line with that, the role of the corporate secretary has also become critical as the guardian of corporate governance in organizations. So I'm very excited about this collaboration today about the topic. And we've really got an exciting lineup of speakers that will be putting forward their viewpoints on this topic. So I'm looking forward to some really interesting debates. And I hope that we are going to have very different viewpoints so that we can really sink our teeth into this topic. Just a little bit about CSIA. We are a global federation of 14 national bodies. And in that federation, we represent over 90,000 corporate secretaries and governance professionals. And we are spread across about 5 continents. And what is important for us in this forum is that we provide a platform where we can share knowledge, where experiences and expertise can be shared. And it's really to encourage that knowledge sharing amongst governance professionals. It is also really important for us that we enhance the profile of corporate secretaries across the world. This sector has actually grown quite tremendously over the last few decades. And in response to that, CSIA was launched in 2010. So we have just last year also celebrated a decade of existence. And it was launched in order for us to provide a unified voice for corporate secretaries and governance professionals across the globe. And that's also why it's important for us to have this collaboration with CCGI so that we can expand that network to grow the governance landscape. So in order for us to provide that knowledge, we actually have to provide a platform using the collective expertise and the experience of our members to share that knowledge and also best practice. So our areas that we really focus on in terms of enhancing the profile is we promote their role as a strategic partner to the board, because I think we've seen in terms of the evolution of governance across the globe, that role has really evolved from being an administrative secretarial role and very much focused on statutory and regulatory duties to a very strategic advisor to the board. And it's important for us that this role is elevated and enhanced so that we are able to get that recognition for the corporate secretaries and an important role that they play. We are also very much focused on promoting good governance practices. And we do that through research, thought leadership, and best practice guidelines. And all of these reports and surveys that we have done is also available on our website. And then a very important part of today is we are very focused on growing that community of governance professionals by working together. And I believe that is one of the aims of today, is to share that knowledge to promote good governance practices on a global scale. So it's therefore my distinct pleasure now to introduce our keynote speaker. And excuse me, Dr. Akhil Prasad has a very long and very illustrious career. So forgive me if it will take a little bit of time to read out his CV. And I must just also caution you that this is not even all of the brilliant achievements that he has achieved in his lifetime. I've really had to shorten it, or else I would be taking up a lot of time today. So if I can introduce Dr. Prasad. He is currently Director and Country Council of India and Company Secretary with Boeing India, and is based at New Delhi. His past offices that he's held was Head of Legal and Company Secretary with Fidelity Worldwide Investments, Director India of Legal Affairs and Company Secretary of the Walt Disney Company in India, Senior Attorney and Company Secretary of General Motors in India, and Assistant General Manager Legal with Electrolux Calvinator. Prior to these, he's also worked with legal teams in the Modicorp Group, Xerox, and Graftech India. Akhil has about over 27 years of experience as an in-house counsel and has worked with teams across different countries. Akhil also holds a doctorate in law, a doctorate in commerce, is a postgraduate in law, and a fellow member of the Institute of Company Secretaries of India, as well as a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators in the UK. He's also a non-practicing solicitor of England and Wales and has an honors in US law with Northwestern University in Chicago. Akhil, therefore, has legal experience in India, the UK, and the US, and he holds professional memberships of several institutes across India. He's currently a member of the board of directors of the Boeing Group, Immediate Software India Private Limited, Naris Networks Private Limited, and also an advisory board member of the School of Law. So Akhil, very welcome, and we look forward to you sharing your thoughts and insights with us today. Thank you.
Wonderful, and thank you for a lovely introduction. First, I must confess that because of Hitinder, I am here, and I'm really privileged and honored to be speaking at this forum. And I must also confess that anybody who has grown up in India has always been fascinated by the Caribbean cricket, and very, very passionate. And that is the reason why I'm so excited to be speaking at this forum. Let alone if I were to be visiting Caribbean, how excited I would be. But thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity. The concept of a general counsel really started in India in the I would say late 90s. Because before that, when I started my career, this was in 1994, when I first became a company secretary. So on this chart, you will see two company secretaries. And as I have always been already been introduced, I've been very fortunate to be able to study and assimilate knowledge, not only in India, but across some leading jurisdictions of the world. And the reason was that when I started as the company secretary in 1994, and that was a time when in India, the concept of a general counsel was being developed. So that was a very strong, I would say, launch pad that a company secretary profession provided to me. Because as we all know, and in all jurisdictions, company secretaries work very closely with the board, and we are exposed to the decision-making process of the board. We are exposed to the governance part. We are exposed to the risk management part. But the most important thing which a company secretary enjoys is a trust and confidence of the directors. Because company secretary, as we know, is the person who is a go-to person, whether it's a liaison between the finance team, whether it's a liaison between other functions of the organization. A company secretary enjoys a very unique position in a company. But what happened in 1991 is that the economic liberalization of India started, and India was following a socialist approach. But in 1991, everything changed, and a foreign investment started to flow. And that was the time when all international companies started to really look at their general counsel office to be someone who can, in addition to the governance part, can also advise the board on the legal ramifications, which, in today's world are very, very important. Because as companies try to grow and expand in different jurisdictions, the expectation from a company secretary and from a legal person is that the person should not be confined to a local mindset, but a person should be looking at a larger geography. So that was one of the drivers why I thought that the companies that you see below my photograph on this chart, these are all well-known global organizations looking to expand across the world. Um, India being a very, very large market, the philosophy was that as perhaps a Fidelity or a Walt Disney or a General Motor or Electrolux or Xerox would do business worldwide, it should be the same ideology to do business in India, including currently with Boeing. Um, so what do we need to adapt as a general counsel? As a general counsel and as a company secretary, it is so how we operate in today's world. So if I am a general counsel with say Boeing and working across, it's a large legal team in Boeing, which is about 120 lawyers. And the expectation is that we all work together as a large legal team within Boeing. So it's not that if I am a counsel in India, I'm only confined to India work. I should also understand how planes are manufactured in the US, how defense products are manufactured in the US, how are they sold worldwide, what are the type of contracts, what is the type of governance which is needed. And for that, it is very, very important that a person who is willing to work for a global company should also have a global mindset. And that global mindset comes up through education. So you have to keep educating yourself. You have to keep learning what is happening within your country, what is happening outside your country. Why is it that, what is the requirement of your client? So for example, if Boeing is looking to sell planes to the fighter planes to Ministry of Defense in India, it is very essential for me as a general counsel to understand what is the product and why is that product very suited for Indian market, or whether why is that product very suited for a Caribbean market, or why is it useful for a UK market. So for example, if you see a company like Boeing selling products to say UK or US or India or other jurisdictions, Australia, it is very, you will find that not all countries are buying the same product. For example, Australia may buy a F-16, US or UK may buy a F-18. It depends upon the geography, and that kind of education and knowledge is very, very essential for a company secretary or a general counsel to really understand. And this is not only about Boeing, this is about any organization of which you are a general counsel or you are a company secretary, that you have to really understand the business of your client. And once you have that mindset to understand the business of the client, the other thing which comes which is of very, very importance is your inner confidence to be able to deal with your client's requirements. So for example, if you are sitting in a boardroom as a company secretary and your chairman says that I want to expand in the Caribbean, the general counsel or a company secretary should not say that this is out of scope because I am a counsel in India. I think it is very important for me to partner with an institution like a CSIA in the Caribbean so that I can quickly leverage my relationship with counterparts in the CSIA to be able to quickly get them a confidence as to how we can expand our business in that kind of a jurisdiction. So a lot will depend upon a general counsel's ability to network across different jurisdictions, establish links across the world. And in my way, the way I have been able to do it is through education. So whether, I have done law from India, from US, or company secretary from India or UK, or law society. So these are the ways to a formal learning process. But what has really helped me is to build networks. For instance, in 2019, when Boeing sponsored me to do a program with Wharton, Boeing wanted a lawyer in me to develop my leadership skills and to develop my business acumen. Because our business is it's very important that a GC or a company secretary understands business very clearly. So it became very important for me to upskill myself, not only on the legal subjects, but also on the business aspects. And business aspects, then it exposes you to a new environment, new people, connections, networks, things like those. One thing I must say that, we were working on a very large transaction in India, which was about a $500 million per year transaction for next 5 or 6 years. And that was possible partly because I had good relations with the other company's general counsel, the network, the power of a network, which is very essential for every one of us to build, to build that network so that we are really helpful and we can be of value to our clients. One thing which I should call out, and I'm sure the professionals who are participating in this forum are very well aware, but it may be a good idea to re-emphasize is it's very important that most of us are trained to talk in a particular language, which is a legal language or a compliance mindset, that it is a very straightforward approach. But I think this is now not how a business person would like to interact with us. So I think the expectation from us should be that we should be able to speak in the language of our business people. So one of the very clear examples which I tell my team is that whenever we are communicating with a business person, we have to talk in a language which that person is very clearly able to understand. And the most important thing is how we communicate. And the most important thing is how the most used communication method today, of course, is emails or WhatsApp. But what is of most critical importance is we are not going to write essays on an email. We are going to explain our position in very simplistic 1 paragraph or 2 paragraphs instead of writing long emails to our CEOs or to our business colleagues. So this has been a development process for me, that when I initially started my career, the communication process was very legalistic, and people used to give me feedback, and that feedback is very important for us, all of us, to embrace. If we really want to learn and improve, it is very important for a general counsel and a company secretary to receive a feedback, and then basis upon the feedback that you receive from clients, it is very important to implement a process or a timeline or a time chart to build upon how we can really improve ourselves in terms of communication and reaching out to our business partners. Because unless we communicate effectively, we will not be very effective in our jobs, no matter what. And if we are an effective communicator, ultimately it is going to lead to a very fruitful relationship with the client. The trust and confidence will be developed with the client, and you will be able to perform better in your services that you provide to your clients. The other thing which I want to really emphasize is on the right side of your screen that you see, I make it a point that I teach in a lot of institutions. And the purpose for doing that is it sharpens your mind. Because most of the time we devote ourselves in office, working for our clients, but very little time sometimes we devote for our own development, professional development. So if you have to be a very effective leader, if you have to be a very effective professional, it is very important that the left side, which is the formal education, and the right side, which is imparting education, you need to balance along with your day-to-day job. So most of the institutions that I have started to teach in the last 5 or 6 years have been to management schools, students from management institutions, not from a law college. I teach at a law college, but I devote more time on teaching the management principles for a very selfish purpose, that if I go to a management college, I am not a management professional. And if I have to deliver a lecture of 3 hours, I will have to prepare for at least 7 hours to go there and teach for 3 hours. And that will give me a new area which I have never done before. And that is exactly what I want to improve in myself. That if there is some inhibition inside me, if there is a subject which I have not done in the past, and if there is something which I really want to improve within myself, is something which I should deliberately try and attack. For instance, when I started my career some years ago, I was very shy of public speaking. I was not able to communicate effectively in a board meeting. And that is the feedback I used to get from people who were inside the boardroom as to why are you sitting so quiet? Why are you not speaking or not deliberating or participating on an issue? And that is very, very important, that if I have to be, people go to a council to seek advice, people go to a company secretary for guidance. Company secretary is a person who will communicate, and who is going to be somebody who is able to effectively move things around. And that is exactly, if I am not doing that, people are not going to be happy dealing with me. So that is the reason why education is important for your cognitive thinking. And then it is very, very important to impart that education and put it to test. So when you are going to a management college, you are facing a class of 200 people. They are putting to you some very, very tough questions. And that is exactly what you need, that you have to keep on telling yourself that I have to put myself on a constant learning path. And if you are a good learner, you will be a good professional, and you will be a very, very successful general counsel and a company secretary. One thing is common between all the companies that I have worked for, that the environment is global. We have to be not only thinking about how I do the work for my own country, but the idea is that we are today a part of a global village, and that global village is very small. People are not, resources are scarce. So we really have to pull ourselves very, very hard in terms of meeting the business challenges. For example, when we are doing a commercial plane transaction, when we are doing a defense deal, we have to be very, very alert, because the business people are working across the globe. Our sales teams are based in the United States. The customer is based out of India. We have to work in tandem to ensure that the deal is sealed as quickly as possible. And one of the very important things, which is very, very critical today, is we have to have the negotiations happen and make the deal happen. It's not about taking a position that how this deal cannot be done. Often a CEO will ask you, how can this be done? And that may not be within the legal spirit of law, but then you have to make it work. So one of the very difficult things which a general counsel sometimes has to do is that once you get an opinion from an external counsel, it is the time that you have to make it implementable. And sometimes you get a legal opinion which is, under the spirit of law, it may not work for business. But I think the role of a general counsel and the role of a company secretary is, when a legal opinion comes to your desk, the real work starts then, and you have to really implement it for business. So that is why, I often say that a general counsel and a company secretary is truly a business enabler. And it is our job to ensure that the businesses implement, sustainability is ensured, there are no bottlenecks. We have to make an environment which is conducive to business. So I'm sure, all of you have had experiences where you have been working in jurisdictions where there are a lot of difficulties, regulatory challenges, legal challenges, litigations. But the real value for a legal person or a general counsel and a company secretary will only come if we are able to remove those obstacles, and we ensure that the businesses are conducted in a way it is supposed to be done. So, these are my initial thoughts. If there are questions, we can always deliberate more. But what I would like to definitely say that the role of a general counsel is changing very, very rapidly. And in the past, we were only supposed to look at contracts or governance issues. But today, I think our role is more of a risk manager, a person who can identify risks in a transaction. And that is the most important thing. In our jurisdiction, we have to prepare a risk report for the board of directors, which we are supposed to identify what are the top risks in the organization and what are the plans to mitigate those risks. Then in most of the companies, the role of a general counsel is also to help in business strategy. And business strategy, no business strategy I have seen, at least in the companies that I have worked for, where a business strategy is complete without a general counsel's view on those business policies. And that is exactly why our role is so important, because we are a part of the senior management of an organization. We are called for important business meetings. And the reason for that is that the businesses want to know earlier on what are the risks which could be associated to business. And a general counsel office or a company secretary office should be able to help business in mitigating those risks. So I'm so excited, the way the future of a general counsel is shaping up in our own organization. When I joined this company in 2013, and even in my previous role with Fidelity, I always raised my hand and I said, I not only want to be a GC, I also want to be a board member. And why a board member? Because I should have a skin in the game. Tomorrow, I should not say that I'm your advisor, so I don't go to jail and the directors go to jail. But the idea is I will go to the jail before you. And that is the confidence, precisely the confidence which a company secretary should be able to give to its board, that I want to be a director. Because if I'm an officer in default, put me to jail first, because I am the one who has implemented the compliance program, who has implemented the risk program, who has implemented the governance program. And if anything were to fail, I am the one who's to be blamed. And if we are able to get that kind of a confidence and trust to the board, I think we are going to be valued in any organization where we go. So it's upon us what confidence and what trust we want to place with the board of directors, not only a general counsel, but a board member. And perhaps in some of the companies, including ours in Boeing, we have seen that lawyers have become CEOs. In our company, we have lawyers of some businesses are headed by lawyers as business heads, as CEOs of those businesses. So that is the limit. The sky is the limit, and that limit any general counsel can aspire to achieve, to become a CEO today, not only a general counsel. So these are my initial thoughts. I will be very, very happy to receive questions, and we can deliberate and discuss more.
Yes, well, thank you. Thank you so very much, Dr. Prasad, for that, sharing those experiences with us and some of the guidance you suggest from the development of your own skill set as general counsel. And I think you have highlighted that the general counsel is no ordinary lawyer, and it is a role that can position you to great things. And the need for them to be immersed in the business of the company and to be a business enabler. And I'm kind of taking a little bit from your presentation that the role of company secretary has in fact enhanced the role of general counsel and allow general counsel to understand how decisions are made in the board and how the general counsel can then be positioned to best assist the board in providing their advice and guidance. I note you also touched on the question of the liability of the general counsel, and not in the sense of protecting yourself from liability, but acknowledging that your role is important, that you must believe in what you say, you must live by your guidance, and the guidance you give can put people in jail, so you should be prepared to stand that consequence, which is a very interesting perspective. But I don't want to take over the discussion, and would like to invite Kamala now to take over the question and answer session. Kamala.
Thank you very much, Faye. And thank you very much, Akhil. That was such a wide-ranging presentation that helped us to understand how you grew in the role as well. So I found that there were a number of really interesting points. And one of them I wanted to ask you a question on, in terms of the fact that, as you mentioned, the role has been evolving, which means that the global mindset which needs to be developed on the part of the corporate secretary is important to be able to serve effectively in the boardroom. I just wondered if you find, since you do occupy both roles, the corporate secretary and general counsel, and do you find that at times you have to step back as general counsel because you don't want to use legal language, you don't want to focus only on compliance, because, as you say, the corporate secretary aspect of it is where you now need to be very encouraging, to be an enabler of business. So I wanted you to comment on that specifically for us, in terms of, do you think that can continue, that marriage between the corporate secretary and the general counsel in one position, that it sits well? Or do you think that the corporate secretary need to be a lawyer, but not necessarily the general counsel of the organization?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Kamala, and it really depends upon organization to organization. I definitely will not suggest that a corporate secretary should also be a lawyer, because it is not necessary. It only helps, if you are also a lawyer, at least your span of work perhaps increases. And it is also upon, Kamala, the HR department of a company, because when your CV goes to a company, what is it that they are expecting from a general counsel, whether they're looking at a person who not only looks after the legal aspects, but also governance aspects. For example, if it were to be a listed company, in some of the companies where they are public companies and listed companies, in some jurisdiction, it is very important that a company secretary only should be looking after or handling the listing part of it, fundraising. And some of the companies, the company secretaries end up reporting to the board of directors. In some of the companies, they report to the financial officer, and in some companies, they report to the chief legal officer. So every company has a different logic of appointing a company secretary and the reporting relationships. But in terms of delivery of duties, I think in most of the companies and in the organization that I currently work, which is a global company, the corporate secretary office is a part of a general counsel office. And this has been true in almost all companies. It may be because I have mostly worked for American organizations, where a corporate secretary office is always treated as a part of a general counsel's office. That is where a company secretary's office is a part of the, a general counsel's office. But I must say that it always helps that if a company secretary has some interpretational issues or want to really understand more on the compliance part, they know that they are a part of a legal department, and the law department can work very, very seamlessly with the company secretary office to be able to provide the correct guidance and advice. I don't think it results into a conflict of interest that a company secretary is trying to implement a compliance strategy, which a law department will try and avoid and stop. I don't think that is going to happen anywhere. It may happen in some very few companies, But largely, it is very, very beneficial if the law department and the company secretary department is a part of a general counsel's office. That's what I've seen in my experience.
Okay, great. And let me just let all of our participants know that at this point, they're free to raise their hands if they would like to ask you a question as well, or they can put their question in the chat feature and I will bring it to your attention as well. We are actually almost at the end of the time that was allocated for this session, but given that we have a window of time before the start of the panel, I hope you will indulge us to take a few questions more. But I want to ask you directly, because you are part of a very large organization. Do you see moments when there may be a conflict between the roles? So for instance, when do you make the decision that this is an issue which ought to go to an independent legal advisor in order that you will act?
So, Kamala, one of the very important aspects is when you are making disclosures to a regulator. So, it depends upon the judgment of a company secretary. A company secretary may say that, this is something which I want to report to the SEC. And the office of the general counsel may think otherwise, that it may pose a legal challenge, that if we are very, very trigger happy to report everything which happens. So that is perhaps one very relevant example where the general counsel's office and a company secretary office should discuss and agree as to what is the kind of risk that we are willing to take. So a company secretary office perhaps may say that under a Companies Act of a particular country, it is required as a material transaction to be reported to a Security Exchange Commission of that particular country. But a general counsel office may say that, I am facing a huge litigation in which if you report directly about this transaction, it could have a negative consequence on my case. And that is perhaps a moment of tussle between the two. But I think in the interest of your, so what interest needs to be balanced is the interest of your company versus the duty to disclose. And obviously a general counsel office will have to take a back step where it's a question, it falls into a misreporting. And that is where a company secretary can just stand up and say, if we do not disclose, directors will go to jail. And that is a time when a general counsel office will have to, take a back seat and give a company secretary a first point of protocol to be able to decide on that issue. But other than that, I don't really have not seen, for example, financial reporting. If financial statements are presented to the board, if the company secretary believes there is something wrong there, or an audit committee needs to be informed. So those are the kind of things where, as a general counsel, I would like to have my company secretary take a final decision on that. But if it is becoming a legal issue, that is where we need to really think and deliberate and decide how we should disclose, getting the least exposure on the company.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Understood. So it's something that you really have to weigh the balances to be able to decide. I see one of our directors has unmuted, and I know therefore that is a signal that she has a question. So Camille, I want to invite you to share your comment or ask your question, please.
Good morning, Dr. Prasad. Thank you so much for that. You got me out of bed at 5 o'clock this morning to join. I'm in Jamaica, but it was worth it. So my question, you had said that you put up your hand to be a director because you want them to know that you're prepared to share liability. You are going to lead from the front. So were you just the secretary? I shouldn't say just. Were you the secretary? Do you believe that what is the liability of a secretary who is just the secretary? And that's the panel we have later. Because listening to you, it kind of suggested that you would only have liabilities if you are a director. Is that your view?
Yes, so Camille, in our jurisdiction, if you are an officer in default, and I think that is how at least the law is written in most of the Commonwealth countries, it is identified that in case of a violation by a company who is an officer in default, so the primary responsibility, the first point of responsibility comes on the managing director, then it goes to the whole-time director, then it goes to a director, then it goes to a company secretary. So that is how a liability attaches itself. So by becoming a director, I am coming from a fourth position to a top position or a second or a third position. And the reason for that is, if you were to ask somebody to become a director on board, the first question they ask is, are you on the board? And then what is your answer? You say that I'm not on the board because I'm a company secretary. And then the person says that under Companies Act, are you precluded from becoming a director? So you will say, no, the Companies Act does not preclude me from becoming a director. So what you do instead is you put your best foot forward, but at the same time, when you are putting that foot forward, you have to also convince the director that they should be willing to invest in a compliance program. So for example, some companies, they do not want to invest in compliances. They want to take a very shortcut approach. And the problem that happens is that most of the functions will issue a compliance certificate based upon which a company secretary gives a compliance certificate to the board, but without testing those compliances. So in my companies, that wherever I have raised my hand to become a board member, I have always ensured that the board of directors invest in a compliance program. And by investment, what I mean is you get a top four, the top four who is going to advise you on the change of law, the top four who is going to handhold you in terms of ensuring compliances. And once you have that inner confidence that the compliance program which I have developed for my own company, what is the probability of a risk? And if you are confident that that risk level is 90 or 95% or higher, that there will not be an instance where, because you will generate audit reports, you will do compliance audits, you will sit in the audit committees, you will see for yourself what are the pluses and the minuses in a compliance program. And if you are able to plug a leak, that is the best thing you can do as a compliance officer of your company. And then you deserve a board seat because of the hard work of the investment that you have done in the compliance program. You definitely deserve a seat on the board of directors. That's how I see it.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. And of course, I remind everyone, they can also put any question or comment in the chat feature, or of course, raise their hand if they want to join in the discussion. You also spoke in your keynote address about the importance of continuing to improve on your own education and learning, because as you say, this role is a key enabler for your board of directors to be able to achieve their strategic plans. Now, there's such growth in both areas in terms of legal developments, and as you shared, the whole thrust in India changed dramatically when they started opening up to allow for a lot more foreign direct investment and all that. How did you actually balance your learnings? Because well, I mean, you have a lot that we saw on the slide that you shared. There is absolutely a need for growth and understanding of governance. And as our chairman mentioned at the start of today's proceedings, the ISO 37000 standard, which in itself provides a whole lot of guidelines. And so there's tremendous learning in governance for the corporate secretary. And then too, there's so many areas of law that is developing as well. How do you balance both if you want to be effective in the role?
So Kamala, that's a great question again. And what I must also let you know is the previous company that I worked for, Fidelity, when I was working with them almost 9 years ago, we were looking after a lot of work from our offshore entities, which were based in Bermuda, because most of the insurance companies and the banking companies, the contracts are written under the jurisdiction of Bermuda. It was our desire then, when I was the GC of Fidelity India, that we should be able to manage and run a lot of companies from India, which is a typical offshore model that India is so now well known for. And today, with pride, I can say that my successor, we were just about 3 lawyers then. Today, they have a team of about 35 company secretary professionals, and they are looking and they are working on the company secretary compliances for entire Europe, entire Asia from India. So what a company secretary can do and achieve is sky is the only limit. But what many companies have done is develop their global offshore centers, across the world, and then, develop capabilities of jurisdictions which are outside those countries. So Europe, Asia, wherever it may be. And then you will have to train your people or hire people with those capabilities that they are able to develop and, work for many, many countries, not only for a particular country where you are a company secretary of. So it purely depends upon your desire. For example, why I studied American law, why I'm pursuing Australian law is because in today's world, most of the transactions that we do are coming from these countries. And when we are negotiating with a third party, which is not a Boeing entity, but a supplier who is based in Australia or in UK or in US, it only helps me that I have studied the law in those jurisdictions so that I'm able to negotiate with them better. I understand the US law also. So somebody cannot say that he is only an Indian lawyer. He doesn't know US law. I may not be an expert on a US law, but since I have studied US law, I can understand what it means, what the implications would be. So it is purely upon how you want to develop yourself, your desire, and then you decide your limit.
Understood. So I'm getting from you a very strong sentiment that it's possible to have that dual role and to manage effectively in both. I see Zahra has her hand up. So Zahra, I invite you into the conversation. And for those of you who just joined, we are going over time a little bit because we do have this break that allows us some space to engage this conversation. So yes, Zahra, go right ahead.
Thank you, Kamla. I just found it very interesting, Akhil, that you said that the corporate secretary actually reports to the head of the legal department, and it just raised a thought in my mind around the independence of the corporate secretary, which is quite important. And when we did a survey about 2 years ago, many of the corporate secretaries actually report to the chairman of the board. And it is important that there is that relationship with the chairman of the board. And I think everybody knows about the very notorious Steinhoff case that we've had, and they call the Stein heist, where there was a very dominant CEO in that organization. So my question is, if the reporting line is internal, does not effectively silence the voice of the corporate secretary, and also curtail their independence when it comes to issues where they need to highlight that there is corruption or fraud or some irregularities in the corporate governance procedures, because they are the custodians of governance. And if that reporting line is internal, I just wonder about the independence then. Thank you.
No, you're right, Zahra, and exactly. So it depends upon a structure. Ideally, yes. So a general counsel also, if if a corporate secretary office is a part of a general counsel office, then the general counsel in those companies report to the board. In some of the companies, like in our structure, our general counsel would report to the CEO and to the board. And a corporate secretary office is a part of a general counsel's office. But yes, where there are organizations, for example, when I used to work in Xerox, the company secretary office used to report to the chairman. They had a model where And it depends upon, also it depends upon if you are an organization which is accessing funds from public, whether through a IPO or through loan arrangements or whatever that mechanism may be. There, the tendency is that because of the investor protection and because of the issues related to investor or shareholder, a general counsel should be reporting to the board of directors. But when you are operating in a closely held business, there, it depends that the company secretary office will report to a general counsel office. So it depends upon what kind of an organization you are working for. But I completely agree with you, Zahra, that even if you are a part of a general counsel's office, a company secretary should have independence. And if I were to be a company secretary, I were to be a general counsel, if I were to have a company secretary, I would definitely nominate my company secretary to be a part of the important board committees and be independent, and then give their advice and their views upon the functioning of those committees very, very, independently and impartially to the board. That, for example, the remuneration committee, investors committee, audit committee is where I would see general counsel perhaps will make less value compared to a company secretary, because that is a clear role of a company secretary to be independent and to be able to add more value as compared to a general counsel. So a general counsel needs to very, very clearly decide what are the areas which should be the absolute domain of a company secretary, because these are the professionals who are educated and trained for a particular profile or a particular job, and that job can only be effective, as you rightly say, Zahra, if a company secretary is independent.
Thank you so much, Akhil. Thanks, Kamla.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, and we really appreciate you spending this extra time with us. I hope you'd be able to stay on for the next panel discussion, actually, which is going to look at whether the roles should be separated. So you can share your point of view there as well. So I want to thank everyone for their patience in staying with us through this point. I know a lot of us in the Caribbean, especially, would have been up probably with no coffee at all, just hanging on and waiting for the short break in order to get some breakfast before we begin our first panel discussion. So I want us to go on that short break now. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, we would have the room open throughout today's event. So all of you will be able to remain connected. Or if you like, you can come out of the room and come back in. Christy is here to allow everyone in as you seek to re-enter. And while we go on that break, which is going to be, just under 15 minutes, we will take the time to check in and prepare our panel for our first panel discussion this morning. All right, so thank you all very much for your patience. Thank you very much, Dr. Akhil Prasad, again, and we look forward to your continued participation with us today as we go on our short break now. Thank you.
Thank you very much again. Thanks for inviting me. I'm so honored. Thank you so much.